Good evening and welcome everyone to the March 28th edition of the Microsoft 365 Meetup for Government. Very excited for tonight's session. I want to go over a few administrative announcements first before we turn things over to our presenters tonight. So for anyone who is new or just joining us for the first time, this user group and Meetup community was established to help promote networking, personal and professional growth, for anyone working in or interested in Microsoft 365, as well as public sector and government applications. We have a few basic community standards we'd like everyone to be aware of. Most important, please be respectful and considerate to other members. We certainly ask everyone treat others as they would like to be treated. This is a public community, so please do not share non-public or proprietary information that you are not authorized to share within a forum such as this. Many of us are members of whether it be a Microsoft, other corporations, or potentially even government agencies who are part of this user group. But certainly we are all here in our personal capacities as professionals and practitioners of technology within Microsoft 365. So certainly we're here representing our personal opinions, not those of our company or organization. We certainly do allow folks to self-promote or promote their offerings, but we ask that folks keep it reasonable and not excessive within the meetup and the members of this community. Would like to thank my co-organizers, especially Andrew Kagan and Andy Oak from Planet Technologies. Without them, this meetup would not be possible. I would like to thank Planet Technologies as a sponsor of this this meetup as well. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Nick Giard. I'm a program manager with Microsoft. Work in and around Office 365 and its applications in government. For anyone who is not familiar with Microsoft Teams, welcome. Glad to have you. Certainly, there's a couple of things we'll draw your attention to. We do have microphones moderated tonight just to avoid out-of-band interruptions, but we are certainly encourage questions and discussion and contribution. So please either use the meeting chat option, or if you see an icon, it looks actually, I think they changed it since this screenshot was taken, but there should be a little hand raise icon. You can use that, and one of the moderators will bring you off mute, and happy to have you chime into the discussion. I do want to call attention to next Tuesday, next month on Tuesday, April 25th, will be our next meetup session. We are going to have some great presenters the authors of Microsoft 365 Administration Inside and Out. So some really deep SMEs who literally wrote the book on Microsoft 365 administration. So very excited for that session. So certainly if you're here tonight, hope you'll join us for next month's session. It will be a good one. Without further ado, though, speaking of great sessions, very excited to introduce our two presenters tonight, Kent Cunningham and Kevin Tupper, both from Microsoft, and looking forward to hearing from them about OpenAI and the future of intelligent conversations. So Kent, Kevin, you guys want to introduce yourself and take it from here?
Sure, my name is Kent Cunningham. I'm the CTO for the federal civilian business at Microsoft. And Kevin?
Hey, I'm Kevin Tupper. I'm a cloud solution architect in civilian team also. Just excited about all the things we're doing with OpenAI. So Kent, should we jump right in?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right, I'll share my screen. Let me know if you have visibility. Everyone good? Can we see it?
We've got
you. You're good to go.
All right. If I'm talking and I try and change screens, or you see me off a slide or something like that, please let me know, because the other day I presented and I was like 15 minutes down the road and they say, "Are you showing this screen?" And I said, "No." So let me know. Obviously, ChatGPT undeniably has captured the world's attention. I don't have to. I would assume everyone on this call has, at this point in time, because we're all in the technology field in some form or the other, has actually used it or played around with at least ChatGPT, not necessarily Azure OpenAI. Tonight, I'm going to differentiate a little bit between the two of those, just to give you an idea of where we're heading. We'll probably spend about a half hour going through Azure OpenAI and ChatGPT, mostly with demos, not with slides. I've got 2 or 3 slides just to position things. And then Kent's going to cover some roadmap and some of the other new topics that are happening on there. This is moving really, really fast. In fact, so fast that you go away for a week and you come back and they released another model and your demos are out of date. So we're going to look at some old things. I don't have all the new stuff baked in yet. But one of the things that I do know from experience is whenever you have something that's this viral, I mean, just take a look at the charts. ChatGPT has more users than TikTok in a quarter of the time. That's unreal. And so whenever you have something like that, you have all kinds of people writing articles. And as a technologist, I'm not a data scientist. So if you ask data science questions, or if I start to go in and talk about deep neural networks, I'm out of my depth, and I'll probably be talking pretty high level. And some of you probably know more than I do about that topic, and so I won't go into there. But as somebody who's been around technology and have seen technology take off, when you get something that's as viral as this, everybody's writing articles. When your dentist is in your mouth and he starts asking you about ChatGPT, and I'm like, oh, that's, it's hit the big time. And the problem is that you've got lots of people that are just writing because they want a clickbait headline, and they'll make stuff up or they'll write from no knowledge of what this actually does and write things that are unreal. I mean, like, they show no sense of understanding the technology. For example, anybody that talks about asking ChatGPT how it feels and is worried about it becoming sentient and breaking out of its box, at least in the sense of ChatGPT or the generative pre-trained transformer model, doesn't at this point understand where those models are. So it's not going to be sentient. It doesn't care. It doesn't have feelings. If you talk about Copilot saying, what do you like this document or not? If we go down to Copilot, it doesn't have preferences. It doesn't have a will. It doesn't have emotions the way we think about them as humans. In the same vein, it's not going to solve all our problems tomorrow. In fact, a great question, if you want to experiment in Azure OpenAI or ChatGPT, ask it what its limitations are. It kind of knows where it goes off the guardrails. And so one of the things that I want to do tonight is just kind of unpack what ChatGPT is, how it fits into Azure OpenAI. And I don't mind taking questions during it. So if there are questions that go into the chat, feel free to ask them while we're going on. And if moderators feel they're relevant at this time, feel free, any of the moderators, to interrupt me. I don't mind that at all. So when we think of ChatGPT, that term seems to me to be a little bit overloaded, to use a programmer terminology, meaning most people are referring to the bot, which everybody has access to on the web, right? And really, ChatGPT is actually the model. This is a web app. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor on the screen, my mouse on the screen, but this is the web app, and ChatGPT is actually a fine-tuned conversational LLM, and LLM stands for large language model. Those are the big foundation models that everybody's talking about these days, that have incredibly large data sets of training that they've been trained on and are able to transfer knowledge. So what's actually happening is when I put a question like, what is ChatGPT, into this web interface, they take that and go out to this model, this model, that the same way we make a web request, like the same type of technology that when you put into a URL, it's a REST web request, and it's going to give back feedback. And what it does is it gives back behind the scenes a document that's called a JSON document, and the web application is simply unpacking that and giving you a chat experience. And it's keeping a little bit of context and history. So what the GPT stands for, G, is generative. And sorry if I'm a little nasally and not coming across very well, but the G is generative. So its job is to generate responses. And so when you start asking ChatGPT about different kinds of questions, or its job is to answer. And it's not necessarily to answer truthfully, meaning it doesn't mean only answer if it has the information. It just means answer. And it does that using the pre-trained information. So So this particular model was trained on about 45 terabytes of data. Everything from the Common Crawl web data, which is available for anybody to train on. Books 1 and 2, it says in their documentation. I don't know what books 1 or 2 are, but I know they're, other than that, they're large amounts of open source books that have been published. All the Reddit type text, that kind of stuff, anything that you can pretty much, you've probably read, it's probably read, it's set in sense of ingested into its model. And so it's through a deep neural network. That's what the T is, the transformer. It's these new, and that came in with Google's invention, or Google's article about attention in 2017. These transformer models are multi-layered neural networks that are basically creating relationships and understanding relationships between words. So if you think about it, the best way to describe it, when you think about generative pre-trained transformer, it's like a super powered, what's the next likely phrase or expression or token in this particular case from the language model standpoint that fits what I know about the universe so far with the context of what someone's told me and what I know about all the data I've been trained on. So if I were to talk to the group, depending on your musical taste, and I said, hit me with you might say Best Shot, if you're a Pat Benatar fan, or like classic rock or something like that, or some other expression. I'm not sure, right? But that's the idea. So as it starts to take more and more context in, it gets more and more accurate in terms of its probabilistic response, potentially. If I asked it a question and said, give me the 17 top flavors of Jamoli, and there's no such thing as Jamoli, at least not that I know. Maybe ChatGPT knows something of this, but it might make that up and give me 17 flavors of it. That's what its job is to do. Now you can put guardrails around that based on your prompts, and I'll show you that as we start to go through. So how does Azure come into all this? Because so far this is all technology developed by this company called OpenAI, which is I don't want to call them a startup because, well, I guess you could, but they've been around for a little while. But they're worth obviously 30 billion, I think, with the last investment that Microsoft put in. And Microsoft invested in them very heavily from my mind in 2018 or 19, I think it was, with $1 billion investment. And all of the infrastructure that there's only about 5 companies, maybe a handful more, that have the infrastructure to train these kind of large language foundational models. When you start talking about 45 terabytes of text and internet working all of these GPUs together to understand that, Microsoft is one of them. And all of this work was done on Azure. And so we have access to all those models. And then not only do you run those, you can run those directly, of course, via OpenAI, but we've packaged them up and put them inside of the Azure ecosystem. So the same way you access any of your other cognitive services, and I'll show that in a second, you can access these kinds of models. Now, this is a little bit out of date, as I mentioned. GPT-4 is now current, which is in preview for some of our largest strategic customers. GPT-3 is generative pre-trained transformer, and that is basically giving you a completion model that you put in text, and it's going to go further down that road. Now, I'm going to show you how to do things that are a little bit more sophisticated than tell me about a haiku in the style of Bob Dylan about my favorite ice cream, chocolate, or Rocky Road, which it can do, and that's pretty cool, but that's not a whole lot of value, I think, to this audience, other than maybe a cool conversation at a party or something. Codex is another model. So this is a descendant of GPT-3, meaning it's fine-tuned based on information of GPT-3, particularly for code. So we can do some fantastic things around code. And then embeddings is a different kind of model that vectorizes or takes words and changes them to floating point arrays. And you can do some really fun things, and I'll show you how we're going to do some things on where that fits in terms of developing solutions. And you see here a picture of clustering. And so what it enables you to do is say semantically what things are alike, what things are different. It can also do things like anomaly detection or recommendation engines, things like that, classification. And then ChatGPT is another model that we have access to. That's a descendant of GPT-3 trained on a highly conversational interactive experience. So it does things like, "Are you sure?" or "You're sure? I'd be happy to do that." And I love it because at least I normally, when I'm working back and typing in my interface, I actually talk to it like it's a human because it was pleasant to me. I'm pleasant to it. So I say, "Would you please do this?" And then I hit myself. I was like, "Please." Obviously you want to be courteous, but the model doesn't care about please. If I said, "Hey, doofus, do this," it's not offended. And so I'll hit that point one more time. So where does this all fit within Azure? From an Azure perspective, this all sits inside of our cognitive services in Azure AI, the same place where you would use our speech to text or our text analytics, those sorts of services, and the anomaly detection service. That's all fitting inside there. Now I'm going to pause here for a second because I can't see the chat. Are there any questions that anybody needed or wanted to interject with at this point? Okay, I take that as all good. Am I still coming across? Somebody give me a thumbs up or something. Okay, thanks, Kent. I saw you in the video. Perfect. Okay, so this is the chat experience. You don't run solutions inside of chat, right? It's great if I want to sit on the side when I'm doing my own code and say, "Hey, what does this Python parameter mean?" You could do all those sorts of things, but you don't build solutions in chat. So I want to give you just kind of a sample architecture before I start going through things, because I'm going to show demos with prompts where I'm asking questions and getting back responses. But normally in a solution, you might have a series of documents, and those documents might get prompts asked against them. So you're going to maybe use an Azure function or something like that, and you'll go up and ask prompts against a whole pipeline of documents. So the prompts you could pre-record those prompts because nobody's going to be sitting in front of a computer saying, "Document 1, let me ask the question. Document 2, let me ask the question." That's all done through automation. And then you could expose that in any kind of a web application. So I'm going to start with, I won't go through these in order from use cases. I'm going to start with my favorite one that basically we all have jaw-dropping moments. So this is an example that I did with the State Department. The State Department has leases all over the world, and part of what they have to do is read those leases. Somebody reviews them, types into a database who did what the payment terms are, and so forth. I spent 3 months with 2 data science folks to basically build a model using NLP. And we had to get sample data, and you have to do all sorts of training, right? Anyone who's been through any kind of data science or AI modeling, when you're building a model, you have to train the model, you have to get relevant data, you have to train for drift, that if the data changes, how do you handle that? So it took us about, like I said, 3 months, two data scientists and myself, not 3 whole months, but 3 months time. I would say it's probably about a month and a half of full work to get a relatively sample model that could take about 5 of these terms from this. This is a model lease. I've changed it so that it's all, not real people and real numbers and stuff like that. But the point is, I just simply said, let's try. This was my first experience with ChatGPT. I threw in this prompt. I said, using the lease below, return a JSON object containing the lessor, lessee, property address. And I just put in normal names of expressions of what you would find if you're using natural language into a lease. And I said, and format the dates in year, month, day format. And I had no idea what I was going to get, right? My jaw dropped when you see this. Maybe if you're not seeing this for the first time, but it's perfect. It's 100% accurate. I was getting, like I said, high 90s. This this gave it back to me in JSON. I mean, I'm basically sitting here saying, okay, what do I do next for work? Because that's pretty breathtaking for anybody who's done that kind of work. So I was convinced right from day one when I saw this that, oh my goodness, this can do things. And this is where those big transformer, these large language foundation models, I did not, there was zero training. We'll talk about zero shot prompts and one shot prompts and few shot prompts, single shot prompts. That I gave no examples. I didn't tell it what lease term meant, lease term including units. I didn't tell it payment frequency. It understands all those terms and was able to go through the entire lease and extract all that content and put it in a perfect JSON document. So if I were to go back to my sample architecture, now this stuff is all boilerplate. I could in a couple of weeks time throw together a pretty sophisticated application that I just drop leases into a some sort of storage container, and it runs through my sets of questions and pulls out that information and does all kinds of things into a database. And I'm done with a really sophisticated language application. In fact, what I haven't done here is I could do, and I'll probably do that for another demo, is chain it, do chained prompts. So now I can say, give me the lease payment terms. And then I could say, okay, now given the lease payment terms and give me the optional lease agreement, extract payment terms from the start date to the end date and parameterize all that, but build a prompt from my results to process further on downstreams, right? So that's called prompt chaining. And I may show you an example of that later on as well. Let me show you one more pretty sophisticated demo. And let me do this really quickly
Yeah.
while I'm doing it.
Kevin,
I'm going to go.
just to jump in for a second while you're pulling that up. So there is a question from the chat of what are the steps involved in loading documents, training, and search in the Azure environment?
So there was no training, right? I don't have to do any training on that at all. The process of loading documents, when in building an Azure solution, you would set something up called a storage container. Then you'd probably have to have some sort of either a Power Platform app or a web app that was built to load data in the storage container. And then normally you'd have typically some event-driven process that monitors that storage container for new data and then runs, in this particular case, what I'm doing behind the scenes is I have a Python script that basically says it sends it this, right? It's exactly what it's sending here. Using, my prompt is using this lease below, and then so you would have to pull the text out from that document in the lease. So I'd use some sort of a PDF extractor to pull the text out and then pass it this prompt with the lease itself. And then it would give me back the JSON payload. And then, of course, you do with that what you want. So there's application. That's what I'm saying. Nobody is going to type all that into ChatGPT every time and then manually pull out the data. Although, quite candidly, that's more efficient than a human being reading every lease. If I could just cut and paste it and then pull out the data, that's still more efficient than a human reading it. However, you would do something like that at scale. Hopefully that answered the question. So another one that we're working on, and I'll show you a very interesting. We'll change gears here, and then I want to make sure we leave time for Kent, and then we'll go into more Q&A. Another demo. This is the State Department. They have human rights reports. So this is a congressionally mandated report. These are public documents. You can see the website that I'm on and go to it. They do these across 194 countries, and all those countries have. It's pretty uniform. And they wanted to talk about, can we do Q&A against that data, right? Because if you ask it, remember I was talking about in the beginning, it will generate a response. So if I say, tell me about human rights, and I'm the State Department, I don't want it making stuff up. I want it limited to what my document does. So what we did here in this Q&A demo is I took Kenya and I took Nigeria, and I ran it through a process called embeddings, where I basically took chunks of the document and I put them into this vector database running that embeddings model, the one that I showed in the beginning in this model families. I basically took paragraphs and said, what's the digital representation of this paragraph? And it gives me 1,500 data points that are floating point numbers based on that text. And I'm not going to get into technically in part because I don't understand exactly how it works, but I do know it's like flagging it or classifying it. Is this about this topic? Is it about this topic? And it's just a bunch of 0 to 1 relationships within 1,500 different areas. And based on that, it's almost like a temperature. So what you can do is when I go back to my Q&A, is I say draft a report with headings comparing and contrasting the human rights abuses one is likely to experience in Kenya, Nigeria, provide examples with data, and draw a conclusion regarding which country is doing better at making improvements and why. And so what it does, what you don't see right now is behind the scenes, I took that prompt and I grabbed that prompt and I basically added to it and I said, first thing I did is I took this prompt and I ran it through an embedding. So I have an idea of what is this question about? And it gives me 1,500 different floating points about this question. And then I say, go to my documents that I have and find me the ones that are closest to that embedding. What's the nearest neighbors, basically? And that's what that clustering diagram I had. It says, give me the ones that are right around the dot that represents this particular point. And it's, we can't visualize it because it's not a 2D, it's not a 3D, it's a multi-dimensional index. And so it gives me that. And what you're not seeing in this prompt is, given this question, here are the likely sources of documents that answer it. Only answer this question based on these sources and answer it only that. And if you don't know the answer to the question, say, I don't know. And I'll show you that in a different example. But you see here, now it uses generative AI, which is that GPT model, and writes a very human-like response based on this question and based on the sources, using very natural language of what comes next, only in the data that it has. So if I came in here and said, what is the color of spaghetti in Korea? It's going to come back with responses, I don't know, because I have no data in my environment that talks about spaghetti or Korea. And so I want to show you what that actually looks like. We're building a solution here. And I want to give you a little bit more understanding of this. So this is kind of the same question. Draft on the bottom. I don't know if it's large enough, but it basically said, let's try it one more time. Hang on, because this is actually a good one, and I want to make sure we can get it. This is not this particular demo environment is not mine, so I don't control whether it's up or not. Hang on one second. Let me go grab the prompt again. No, you wouldn't have a successful demo if something didn't go wrong, right? Okay, human rights. Here's my question. All right, let's make sure we're back here. And I'm going to say I want to go through contextuals, and let's give 7 documents. Let's try it one more time. Yeah, okay, their key is down. I knew we had a little bit of an outage today, so it's not going to be able to show you. But what we have going here, what you would have seen is we have the same kind of technology that you're seeing in Bing. I don't know if everyone's seen the new Bing yet, where it actually shows citations and will show me all the prompts behind the scenes that we're working. So unfortunately, I won't be able to show you that one.
So Kevin, there is a question in the chat, and this may get into what you were just about to show, but I'll just read it off here from Grescia. And it says, so there was no training in this example. GPT-3 was able to solve the task with the documents, only the target documents that you process by by the prompt. Can you show an architecture, an example where you use your own documents to engineer the prompt, for example, using embeddings, and then talk about fine tuning? So I know you were just talking about embeddings.
Yep.
And so the follow-up question was, given the embeddings tool, can you show us that architecture? And then in the example you gave, when you answer this question only using the attached sources, otherwise say, I don't know, is that included as part of the prompt?
Yes, it is. So I don't have an architecture handy, but I'll kind of just throw it into this one. Basically, I'm going to take these documents and I'm going to have a different pipeline that pre-processes the documents first to show to chunk them, right? Because you can only take one of the limitations, although GPT-4 is much larger. GPT-3 has a limitation of about 4,000 tokens, which is about 3,000 words. So you're going to take smaller segments semantically and chunk them. So you have to take large documents, you have to break them down through some sort of a pipeline that basically says, here's a logical chunk. You don't want to, you want to, if you can, understand, work within the markup of the document itself. So if there's natural headings within the document, you'll want to follow along with those. And you'll say, okay, give me an embedding for this, and you store it. And now you basically have let's just say a CSV file, for lack of a better analogy, some sort of vector database that stores those. And when I get my question in here now, what you were seeing with my question, and my goodness, I wanted that demo to show. I'm taking this question here, and what I'm doing is, again, I'm embedding that question, and now I'm just finding the nearest ones that are relative to it, and I'm pulling now back the actual text, not the embeddings, but I said, these are the nearest embeddings. I know the ID, and I know which text it goes to, and I'm pulling back, say, the nearest 10, and just as the questioner said, I'm basically saying only answer the question based on this text that I'm giving you. So it was almost like if you were to see my prompt, my actual prompt, it said, given this context, and then I say context, and it's words, right? Words, and these might be 10 paragraphs. And then I say, answer this question. Answer this question. And if you cannot answer only from the context, say, I don't know. And then I say question. So this is all about prompt engineering. There's all kinds of documents on the web about how best to do that. It's an art at this point still, kind of science, but it's still an art of getting that right. Now, because a lot of people say, I need to fine tune, I need to train it in my data. And that's where people are mistaken initially, because it's normally you would, when you think of training models, that's what you have to do. You have to take your data and train it. The purpose of these foundation models, these giant pre-trained models, is they understand their area very, very well. Fine tuning would actually be for, how do I want to respond to questions in different ways? So I might fine tune something so that I'm not using, let's say I had a particular language guide. I guess MPAA or whatever the writer's guide is, and I wanted to say, when you're asked questions about this topic, here's how I want to respond. That's what you do with fine tuning. You're basically putting in prompts and answers, and you're training. It's almost like doing few shot prompts, but with lots of examples. So let me give you an example of a multi-shot prompt. This is one for, let's say you want to develop your own bot. I said, your intention. I'm telling the bot what it is. I'm saying you're an intention classification bot. You understand natural language from my car. I tell it front driver, Windows 1. I work through the driver's windows. I say your actions are open window, set radio station, and with a parameter, set temperature. And then I give it examples. So this is training data. This is a few shot prompt. Now, if you were doing fine tuning, you might do that with a lot more than just this. And you would only do it if you can't fit them within this natural boundary of the token limitation. But here I'm giving examples, and now I just say prompt is 62 degrees. And what's the response? The response for 62 degrees is set temperature 62. If I said what's interesting is I said it's going to extrapolate. This is where we talk about the idea of transference, right? Drive at 80 miles per hour. Drive on cruise control. This is the natural language model at work. That doesn't. I mean, oh, interesting. So let me see if this is experimentation, right? Set speed, set cruise speed to 80 miles per hour. Now let's see. Now I didn't give it that example at all. So there we go. So set cruise speed, it just inferred that as a new command to 80 miles per hour. Now you wouldn't necessarily do that, right? You'd want to define your commands, and you'd probably say, if it's not a command, don't make one up. But that's the idea of this is generative, right? I didn't say only limit it to your commands. It just said, okay, I see what you're doing. And it generated a new API command. So really sophisticated stuff. I'll give you one more example, then turn it over to Kent really quickly. I worked over the weekend with a buddy of mine who's a CTO for a fintech startup. We were just having some fun. He knew I was doing this. I said, sure, let's try it. He brought me in. I won't tell you the company, but he brought me into his SQL backend and said, show me what you can do. And I said, do you have any consolidated data tables? So he said, sure. And he pulled up this pretty wide table. And I said, just dump the structure in, just the field names only. And he did. And I said, give me a really complex SQL query. And, what do you want from a natural language? So he said, give me a rolling sum quarterly of our profit and loss versus what we expected. And wrote the natural language query. There it goes. I said, here, try running this. He runs it and it errors out. I said, what version of SQL are you using? He said, 2019. So I corrected my prompt and said, give me a T-SQL example for SQL Server 2019. It corrected it and he ran it, and natural language ran fine. And I told him what you should probably do is obviously put some marketing material about this and it's natural language. I came to find out, just listening to another guru, who said, no, that's not the way you should handle that. What you should actually do is, if you get an error message, trap it, take your error message with your original prompt and said, I asked this query, I got this error message, can you correct the query? Then go back and rerun with the corrected query, because it will do a really good job correcting your query, right? So that's all this kind of code generation in Codex, which I didn't even get a chance to demo. But just we're in a new world. Those of us who are out here pitching and selling and presenting and showing this, we're all learners right now. This is something completely different than most of us have experienced. Those who are traditional programmers don't think as prompt engineers, so it's a new skill for all of us to learn. So just to me, I have a really optimistic view of where we're headed with this. I appreciate everyone's attention. I'll certainly stick around for questions for quite a while, but I want to give Kent time to talk about roadmap and where we're headed.
Thanks, Kevin. That was awesome. I will share a presentation for a moment. Several of the things that I'm going to talk about, unfortunately, don't have demos available, so we have to go the PowerPoint route. Please tell me when you can see this, if you don't mind. I loved your 80 mile per hour example. We have I live in Nashville.
We see you, Ken.
I'm sorry?
We see you, Ken.
Okay, thank you. We have your 80 mile per hour example. They have all the traffic cameras in Nashville, Kevin. They have them up just to do things like find people that are on the run, right? So if you stole a car, it'll do license plate reading, that type of stuff. They told us that they'll never actually look at your license tag unless it's going more than 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. And my wife was quick to tell me that that's every time I leave the house. So probably a lot of pictures of me floating around. I need to summarize real quickly so we can stay on track. As Kevin mentioned, there's a lot of headlines that Some are just capture. I read one today that says, here's how Microsoft is using ChatGPT to make you more secure with some announcements we made today. We did make some announcements with Copilot with OpenAI, but that's very different than saying we're asking ChatGPT to secure your environment with public data. So just let's please be aware of what we're reading, just something for everyone to be aware of. There's a variety of things on here, 3 of which were even announced in the last 2 weeks. So GitHub Copilot got a new update called Copilot X. Really allows you to go well beyond just doing comment created code. It allows you to have a new experience to actually recognize and explain code and recommend changes and fix bugs and even do security analysis of code. And this was really the first implementation that Microsoft provided in conjunction with GitHub of how do we take this technology and really put it to its paces in a contained environment where it's looking at kind of controlled data sets. They then very recently announced the Microsoft 365 or the M365 capabilities with Copilot, which is what I'm going to go through very quickly in a couple of slides, as well as some things that we announced for the Power Platform. And then today, there was an announcement around what Microsoft can do from a security perspective with Secure Copilot. And so I'm just going to touch on a couple of these and several of the things that folks were talking about, like how do we, if you're looking for like what's the easiest way to take some data and train that data, if that data already sits in a SharePoint repository, or if that data is your own documents, or if that data is content that you can very quickly point Office or a Power virtual agent at, there's some super easy ways to get that ball rolling. Just as a quick reminder, if you didn't see the announcements from last week, right? So M365 Copilot allows you to take the large language models that Kevin was talking about, mix that with your graph data, right? And your graph data really it understands what your documents are, who you're speaking to, what your meetings are, what content you're creating, what you're reading, who created the content that you're actually reading, and allows you to take that graph data that we know about the entire environments and put that together with the Microsoft 365 applications and allow you to query your own data inside this environment. By the way, anything that you use to train this environment or anything that you use to streamline this environment and tune this environment, we don't actually use to go back and train the model. Your data is your data. We don't expose that in any of these cases. But what this really does do, you've heard a lot of people say, well, if you think about an Office application, 80% of the people use 20% of the features, but different people actually use different 20%. What this allows you to do is create content not only much faster, but it allows you to be able to use the features that you otherwise didn't know how to use, right? So there's a lot of advantages that you get. So what the company likes to say is that it allows you to be more creative in Word, more analytical in Excel, more expressive, if you will, in PowerPoint, and more productive overall, right? And so what 365 Copilot really does is it allows you to look across your own environment and apply those to the tools across all of 365 to use large language models to create content, to analyze content, and really to provide you new insights. So, for example, I can come into Teams and say, based on the meetings that I've had in the last few days with Noah and Nick, tell me what the latest date should be for Project X and what the next steps are and who owns them, right? When should we be able to wrap this up? And it analyzes my Excel documents, my Word documents, the chats that I've seen, the emails that have come in, and allows me to very quickly get a summary of what needs to happen. So that's in a nutshell what 365 allows us to do with Copilot, and we're applying this really to all of the different tool sets that we have across the 365 environment. If you were to see Copilot in Word, here's someone typing a document and asking it to create a draft proposal. Maybe you previously wrote a PowerPoint, or you previously just had a Word document, or maybe you had different notes internally, or maybe even past proposals that you've written, and you want to point it at that to say, help me very quickly create content, and then tune that as you need. Right. This is not a proposal that hopefully no one would automatically create proposals and contents and then shove that out the door without proofreading it. But it gives us a great template to start with. And while some of you have probably gone to even the public version of ChatGPT and said, give me a paragraph that explains this, or give me whatnot, that, give me a bulleted format. I actually watched a video on YouTube where a gentleman was building training sites, going to ChatGPT and saying, build me a slide format model that explains the following. And it would literally say, here's you 19 slides, just copy this content into your slide template and make that happen. The problem with that model, while it's very powerful, is that it's using public data. So if you want to be able to have the capability to do this right inside of the tool set that you're using every day and use your confidential internal documents and not expose that out to the world, that's the type of thing you'll be able to do with Copilot for Word and Copilot for Office. With PowerPoint, this is kind of taking capabilities that have been in PowerPoint. If you think about the option that we've already had in PowerPoint to say, build me a slide from an existing known slide. Now we have the option to say, actually build me a slide. Oops, that didn't play, I don't believe. Build me a slide out from a variety of other content, from Word documents, from internal content, from PowerPoint documents, and actually format and create that. By the same token, if you've seen what has been available in Power BI, where you could do natural language modeling and natural language search, the option is to be able to do that inside of Excel and say, actually tell me summaries and tell me trends and what you can learn from this data, right? What are the risks and the trends and things that seem to be anomalies from maybe last quarter or the last time we reviewed this data, and have that become available to me. There's tools for actually helping you summarize and very quickly read your emails in Outlook that are coming as well. And if you've probably received 5-6 page emails before, things that have been forwarded from multiple people and sent through, this gives you an opportunity to very quickly understand what are the asks of the emails, what are the open items, and not only give you a summary of what the email is doing, but even give you suggested answers and responses and actions, maybe even meetings that you need to be able to set up and schedule and invite folks that are already on that meeting heading that you may want to include in the email. Copilot in Teams is coming out with a feature that allows you to look across the environment and ask questions if you're late to a meeting or if you happen to actually miss a meeting, and ask questions like, what did people think of this project that I mentioned? What were the most commonly suggested items for addressing the issue? Who has the open task items? What decisions were actually made and who actually owns those actions? You could join a meeting perhaps 10 minutes late, like most of us do by the time it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and come in and say, what have I missed thus far? These types of capabilities are coming to the Teams platform. My current favorite, and I have 3 more of these, but my current favorite is something that is called Business Chat. And Business Chat is a new capability that'll be coming to the Teams platform that allows you, in my mind, to really reach across 365 in a variety of ways, right? Help me actually understand what's going on in my day. I have just today, Monday, yesterday, we needed to, we were submitting a response for a partner and with a partner to an RFI. And I had to send someone an IM and say, have we finalized this? What are the open actions? Have we actually submitted this? On the same token, here you see Copilot with Business Chat just asking this information of the platform. Have we submitted this? And see if someone has actually already posted that information, if those tasks have been closed off. What are the open items? What are the next steps? What are the needs that we need to go through? If you're like me right now, if I go over to Teams, I would like to, let's just compare these, right? I have 23 unread chats and 34 unread activities. So these are things that it's always hard for us as we go through our day to be able to keep up with all the different things going on in the background through our chat platform. And this allows us to just very quickly be able to use the large language models and the OpenAI platforms to be able to quickly catch up with our day. With Power Virtual Agents, Microsoft has also given you a way to create a chatbot in the most simple, almost literally no training way. If you think about the chatbots that we've created in the past, we've had to, for the most part, create an FAQ or create an entire spreadsheet perhaps of questions and answers, and then ask it to understand, are they are they asking the exact same thing that I have in my Excel spreadsheet, and can I figure these things out? The capability now exists in preview with Power Virtual Agent for you to point the tool at the appropriate data that you want it to use internally, and literally type out, as you can see on the screen, create a chatbot for me that this example, I believe, uses, it's a credit check. Ask you for your social security, your name, your address, maybe your phone number, the last 2 jobs you had, whatever, right? It gives us the option for you to very quickly just literally type out what you want the chatbot to do and have that go. I saw a demo last week where someone pointed this at an entire website and say, take the content from just this public website and create a chatbot for me just using this URL and train it. And it was just that quick. To be able to get the entire chatbot off the ground using far more data than what was available in just an FAQ. Let me go one more further. Also, just today, and I know we only have a few minutes, but just today was announced something called Security Copilot. And think of Security Copilot as a tool that allows you to look across all of your Microsoft security environment and very soon also third-party security environment. Work with your tools and be able to work with your logs to actually ask it questions like, what is my overall posture? Is this vulnerability known or seen in my environment? Does this particular file have any malicious activity? And literally upload a log into the platform so that you can very quickly have the option to be able to do your threat detection and your inspections and your responses across multiple different data sets of logs and actions and triggers that you may have seen, so that you can discover malicious behavior and threat signals that you may otherwise not have seen. It also helps those who maybe don't have quite the staff to be able to go through the amount of logs and the disarray of vendors that they may have in their environment to be able to look at these things very quickly. Security Copilot can help you with this type of thing. So I have 2 closing slides just very quickly. While we've talked about a lot of things that are roadmap, I should point out that for at least the last 4 years, there's been over 60 different AI-powered capabilities in the M365 platform alone. There's a wide variety of AI-powered services that are coming from the existing cognitive services, AML and Azure Applied AI. The majority of the ones that are OpenAI are a roadmap at the moment, and the dates on those are forthcoming. I'm not going to be announcing dates today, but the dates on those are forthcoming and will be shared in the future by Microsoft Corporate. Unfortunately, not on this call, but there certainly are some things that you can do today. You can go ahead and get started by leveraging the tools and the platforms that are available and the mechanisms that we've already outlined in this session. And please let us know if there's anything additional that we can do to help. I'm going to wrap up quickly because I know that we're at the end of time. And Nick, I'll ask you if there's questions that we need to address.
Yeah, thanks, Kent. That was a great walkthrough, and I think, as we noted before, Copilot probably deserves its own whole deep dive, particularly while this is I think, a very early announcement as more details emerge. So I think certainly something we will try to plan as a future meetup session to really deep dive into Copilot. But Kent, you did a amazing job summarizing what's been some very recently breaking information. There were a couple questions. I think one we answered in the chat around just the availability and plans for government clouds, which I think you spoke to, but And we also put in the chat, I mean, most of this has just recently been announced, is not even in the commercial environment yet. Heck, I don't think even those of us who have access to dog fooding builds have it yet. So it's still, there's going to be a ways before it's everyone's hands-on with it, but it's certainly a good example of, I think, the vision for how this is going forward. There was a question which I thought was an excellent one around, not that they're not all excellent questions, but how do we safeguard our tenant or data from insider threats using tools like Copilot for malicious purposes? Looking forward to learning about the security, auditing, and compliance surrounding the use of Copilot.
Right. I mean, so insider threat detection in the same mechanism could be addressed either through mechanisms like what Kevin showed for analyzing your logs and training the model. It could be used through Security Copilot, like we showed today. You're literally you literally have a prompt just like you do on ChatGPT. So if you want to look for malicious activity, you want to inspect the actions of a particular person, be able to look across the graph, across your SIEM, across your different logs, and be able to look for anomalies in that environment, you could certainly take those same steps.
All right, thanks, Ken. And then I think there's one other question here, which was, folks are interested in getting a copy of your slides. I'm sure we can help facilitate that, but wanted to check if that's something that you'd be willing to share
I'm
out.
95% sure I can share all these slides, but Nick, I'll let you know in the next 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay, we can definitely try to either get something posted in the meetup, or send out information to the group after Kent verifies
I'm sure
that.
I will commit to scrubbing them and making sure we can share everything that we can, but I think we can share everything in this deck.
Okay. And then I know Kevin was, from your message in the chat, was that an offer to go back and do some additional demo for anyone who wants to stay past our scheduled time?
Absolutely. Happy to show that one. That web application, it just needed to be restarted. I talked to the author and said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Oh, it's down. Sorry, restart." So it's back up, and I can show that if anybody wants to see the actual prompts behind the prompts.
Yeah, if you're willing to spare the time, I for one would love to see it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But for anyone who does, since we are past our scheduled time, for anyone who does have to drop, I do want to just first say thank you very much to both you, Kevin, and Kent, for taking the time to inform all of us about this. Certainly excited to see how this technology continues to evolve, as well as how some of the things that we're talking about, like Copilot, continue to, as more details become available. But thank you both very much for your guys' insights and information tonight. And thank you everyone who was able to join us this evening. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kevin for anyone who wants to stay late and see an extra demo.
Yeah, so I'll just give the quick explanation as I already did. So I already ran the question through. It said draft a report with headings comparing and contrasting the human rights abuses one's likely experienced in Kenya and Nigeria. Now, this particular data set has the entire body of human rights reports, so all 194 PDFs in here. And this is a pretty cool example. Now, this is something we're just still building out. This is not live yet, but this is going to be an industry solution accelerator that, with source code, that partners and customers will be able to use and turn onto their data. It gives them like a 95% solution to their context, or 90%, and then there's a little bit of coding probably to fix that. I'll show you one example. That's my question, and so it pulls back, and the way I've set my developer settings, I said give me 8 documents, and what's going on, it's saying here, search for human rights abuses, Kenya, Nigeria, comparison, contrast, examples, conclusions. So this is a semantic search with cognitive search on the front end. It's using cognitive search to get documents, and now it's doing semantic against the documents it pulled back. And what you'll notice here, it's like, why is this country here? And supporting content, it's got in here Uzbekistan. That's not has anything to do with human rights in Nigeria and Kenya. Well, because the way we've done semantic, it's actually pulling in the entire question. So it could be that those particular countries had very significant examples that had human rights violations that were fitting within my prompt as a nearest neighbor. And so you see the prompt, it says, my pre-prompt says, be brief in your answers, answer only with the facts listed in the sources below. If there isn't enough information below, say you don't know. Do not generate answers that you don't use, that don't use the sources below. If asking a clarifying question to the user would help you, ask the question. Each source has a name followed by a colon, and I give it information about what's coming. And then we give it the source document, because what I'm doing is I'm actually going to parse this document later to go to where I need to go. I use that document, and you'll see that in a citation in a second. Down here in the citations, that's where it shows the documents. And it's an error to actually even use a source document here that has fortunately it didn't pull back information on Uzbekistan, but it had it in the list of supporting content. What I could do as part of the application is ask it another prompt against this question that says, given this question up here, give me a JSON array of all the countries that are listed in the question or are relevant to answering the question. And it would nail that every time. It would only come back with Kenya, Nigeria. If it was a generic question across all countries, I could say, give me an empty JSON array if it is applicable to all countries. Or I could say, if they ask about the Eastern Hemisphere or Africa, Southern Hemisphere or West Africa, I could narrow it down, right? Because it understands language. And the nice thing now is that I could click here and pull the citation back and actually now pull the document and the context of that particular document where it answered the question. So I have the supporting content, the citations that I could go to, and the thought process. So there's no concerns about it going off the guardrails or it being not transparent AI, which is really important when we're talking about responsible AI. Very important for this particular customer in terms of human rights, right? You're dealing with human rights and abuses in your report. You want actual factual data. So sorry that it didn't go as well the first time around, but I'm glad that the team that's helping work on this was able to get it set up. So if any questions on that, Nick, I'm happy to answer.
Looks like we have one in the chat that says, and I'll, there are no stupid questions, Allison, but Allison asks, is this multilingual?
Yes. In fact, when I was demoing this with the State Department, they asked if it understood Russian. And I said, can you answer that question in Russian? And no problem. It answered in Russian. And her jaw dropped. Mine did too, but I assumed it was pretty good at it because I had used it for translating Spanish quite a bit. Yeah, Kent said 26 languages tested so far. By the way, I will say this about translation, because I have a friend who's a native Spanish speaker, and he sends me sometimes. He knows I like to learn Spanish, so he'll send me some things sometimes in Spanish. And when I don't know it, I was going to this thing called Google Translate. By the way, anybody else besides me use Bing now in their vocabulary instead of Google something? I actually now say Bing something because it gives me what I want. Anyway, back to, I used to use Google Translate, and same with Microsoft's Translate. It's not bad, but it translates based on just a different way. It's not always perfect for somebody who's a native speaker. And I started sending the stuff he was sending me to ChatGPT, and I just said with ChatGPT, translate this to whatever language, in this case, Spanish to English. He said it is absolutely amazing how much better it is than what I was showing him before, not telling him how I was doing it. Because it's trained on that language, right? It's a different, these large language models are something different than the way we've been doing things with the generalized model and training before.
So that dovetails with a question from Aaron. Says, does the model take questions with multilingual prompts or only from a translation perspective?
Yes, it'll understand the language that you're speaking to it. You don't have to say, I want to go to Spanish mode.
So Kevin, I mean, what I infer from that is whatever languages it supports in terms of it's been trained with Spanish, the same as it's been trained with English, right? So if it's a language it's been trained with, is that a correct statement, or is it?
Yeah, yes. Kent just put in there, you can test in multilingual prompts in Bing chat. The one thing that you have to do know, right? The corpus is ginormous for English. If you're using some other language, it might not be as significant. The language might not be as complex either. So, but most of the Romance languages it does really, really well at. I was told, by the way, also Chinese, it's really, really good at as well.
I don't see any other questions, but not sure if, wait, there is one. Could you provide a timeline on when this demo will be available in the commercial sector?
The
think you're on
demo,
mute, Kevin.
the
You are.
demo in the commercial sector, I'm not sure what that. I don't quite understand that. When a solution accelerator will be available.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, this already runs in the commercial sector. This is all everything I did was all in the commercial sector. It was in the commercial tenant. The demonstration environment that we just built there for using Q&A against your own repository, that's being built out for public sector customers. I'm not sure if they make that available, but I can assure you there are dozens of already examples being surfacing on the web. So this will be pretty standard type stuff. Open sourced, I would think.
All right, thanks, Kevin. I'm gonna end the recording here, and then certainly happy to unmute everyone's mics for anyone who wants to come off mute and ask any other questions. So we don't have to just do it through the chat. So bear with me here 1 minute.